top here at DACF. This is the third focus group, third of three, looking at the results of the Growth Management Program survey, where we're going to ask for your help prioritizing technical assistance needs. They have shown up in all of the focus groups and throughout the survey. So we expect a robust conversation today. Just a quick overview. First of all, thank you to the people who responded to the survey. We had 74 responses, many detailed comments. I know it took a lot of time and these meetings are taking time, so I really appreciate the investment that everyone has put into this. As I said, this is the third of three, the prioritized TA resources. One thing we changed, by the way, is this had said TA resources to prepare comp plans, but a lot of it is to implement them as well. So we've adjusted the title literally today as we were getting the slides pulled together. So each of the focus groups has about a third of the survey questions, and the survey questions were extensive. Those of you who have been on so far know this slide. The work we do is complex, and so was the survey. We asked questions around actions and barriers to achieve growth in growth areas, strategies to implement our goals of where to direct growth, input on improving and streamlining the preparation of comp plans, and then also input on support needed to prepare and implement comp plans. I added that in there today too. How to change the statute, and then the utility of the comp plan process. Excuse me 1 second, I have to deal with the frog in my throat. Y'all did not want to hear that cough. Okay. We also received many thoughtful, extensive written comments. They're summarized in a story map format along with the survey results. All of the comments, if you want to get to them, are provided verbatim, but we've summarized them as well. So here we are today, the third focus group, and those are the questions out of the survey that we're going to be focusing on. Quick overview, many of you have been on these before, but just very quickly for those who haven't, this link, which Joan is going to put in the chat, takes you to the story map of the survey results. We summarize the comments on the right. The actual number of responses is in bar charts, and then we've summarized the kind of the pro, con, no response into pie charts. Those are the ones I'm going to present today. If you want to see the detail, you can use the plus and then the X to open up individual comments or close them. And then to dive deeper at the top, once you open the comments, you can open a new page and get into them. You can also do that with the charts. If you want to see some of them that are longer than what's viewable, you hit that, you hover and you'll see them all, and so on. Refreshing the page helps a lot as you're going through the survey or the story map, pardon me. So the focus today, again, TA needs to prepare and implement. I'm going to talk for, I think, a little less than half an hour today, and then we'll have a good hour for general reactions, whether we missed things, and then we're going to be seeking your priorities for technical assistance. We've prepped that slide, and we're hoping that you will make sure we haven't missed anything before we do prioritization. Quickly, who responded? I'm going to do this very quickly because I do recognize a lot of the same people. If I miss anything, you can go to the end. These are the last questions in the that are on the survey map. We had most responses from people who are statewide or work in multiple regions, and then it went increasingly Southern Maine, Mid-Coast Maine. The exception there is Eastern Maine Development Corporation at the third number, 9 people. And then the least number of respondents in Lincoln County, Northern Maine, and Sunrise County. I will say, though, that the first meeting of the first focus group was with the regional councils, and we definitely have had more input from some of the shorter bars as we've gone through this. We also you can see what town people came from. 34 out of 74 represent multiple communities. 63 out of 74 have drafted or reviewed a comp plan since the rules changed in 2012. They are municipal staff, regional planning staff, comp plan committee members. This no response of 11 corresponds to the people who said, no, I wasn't involved. And then consultants, interested citizens, state agency reps, planning board members, and I think this was a town clerk. So let's get into the detail today. In this case, we're asking the effectiveness of actions to direct growth away from critical habitats, ag land, working forest land, and so on. So here's the question. It's one of the multi-part answers where we asked you the effectiveness of 6 different, this is 5 different actions. I'm going to look at the pie charts for 2 of them and then summarize the remainder. And I will do that in the other questions too. I'm not going to hit you with every single pie chart we've got in the survey map. So land conservation was clearly the winner here. Almost 80% saw it as effective and highly effective to direct growth away. One thing I'll point out though, is that education, the next one on, and outreach was also rated high, but somewhat less. It was at 61% in terms of effectiveness. And then jumping down to mapping of climate hazards, that was seen as 77% effective and highly effective to direct growth away from basically critical areas. One thing that we've worked on, Ashley Gamache, who prepared the story map for the survey results, has also prepared a really good story map to give you mapping of climate hazards all over the state. And Joan's going to pop that into the chat as well, so you can take a deeper dive into those details. Comments from state agencies during consistency reviews, current use taxation, those were seen as less effective. State agencies at 46% effective and highly, and then current use taxation at 43%. And there were a lot of comments around the current use. Those concerns centered around the fact that they're seen by many as being exploited by wealthy landowners to lower their taxes, and then when land values go up, they'll just pay the penalties because they can sell the property. There are force and working waterfronts are actually kind of distinct. Most current use programs have to deal with not absolute conservation, but some restrictions on development, whereas working waterfronts are kind of distinct. They're growth areas in many cases, and there's economic activity there. Some people suggested examining current use as a means of developing affordable housing or identifying properties that could then have affordable housing developed on them. There were comments about how zoning models could be improved and strengthened to protect farmland and critical habitats using overlays, coordinating cluster subdivisions. And comments on the role of state agencies were pretty mixed. Some said, yep, it's helpful, but it comes too late in the process. And others were that it was a little tone deaf to what their local needs were. Obviously, financial incentives for conservation are mentioned, as you would expect. Tax incentives, actual money. People also indicated that there's some places where there are no land trusts, and so helping to spread that support is an issue. While people did say that while land conservation is effective, directing growth to growth areas is the essential kind of flip side. One interesting comment indicated that, as we know, farmland is often, almost always, really good at accommodating septic systems, and that we need to examine septic technology for the viability of septic systems on marginal land, that is not farmland. I thought that was a good insight to offer. So our conclusions here are that I think it's worth examining and reforming current use programs and considering the application to support affordable housing. Several great bullets here for how to develop stronger model zoning ordinances. overlays, buffers, growth boundaries, limiting extensions, this coordination of open space, and the alternative septic system issue. Public engagement comes up all the time with this, that it's essential, and you'll see it in multiple places. State input earlier, we're already working on that, as some of you have heard in the earlier focus groups. Beginning with Habitat is working with the Municipal Planning Assistance Program, and some of the state agencies have already offered up in their comments that they're interested in how they might provide guidance earlier on. Okay, and financial incentives for conservation. We obviously conclude that that's important. This was phrased a little differently. This was asking you to choose 3 of the following types to encourage growth and development. And so apologize for the tiny font here. It's really just a function of it coming out of the ArcMap format. But the highest one there is municipal grants for implementation ordinances. So that's zoning, land use, infill. Those are the examples. Then funding to regional councils to provide municipal technical assistance, municipal grants for comp plans. So interesting that municipal grants for implementation was definitely higher than for comp plans. And then also funding for state agencies or regional councils to improve data assembly, GIS maps. And then finally, funding to MPAP to produce or procure technical materials came in at last place, except for no responses. And I want to flag that because we go to the comments, and then in the comments, there were people saying we need to support the Municipal Planning Assistance Program in order to develop models and resources, to update old manuals, to help towns adapt models to lower the cost of hiring people, GIS support to the councils, and then developing and providing data to reduce the local burden. So I don't know, I just got a chuckle out of, we're the last ones to get funding here, but there's a whole lot of resources that people want us to update. So just, a little typical. Funding to the regional councils, then to support towns that have little or no staff. One caveat one person mentioned there was the way our funding streams work. There are match requirements for receiving the funding to provide municipal TA. And some people say, well, if you make us pay member dues, there's a perception that local interests are being dictated or overridden by what the regional council needs. I don't know how widespread that is, but it's something I hadn't heard before. One person said simply direct money to support developers. Planning for money is just a waste of money. Money for planning is a waste. And again, as we heard earlier, digital parcel maps are still not available in many towns. So our conclusions are for MPAP to update TA resources and models, reduce data requirements and assembly. We've heard that many times. Support access to GIS. We're working on trying to get funding and support for digital parcel mapping, support the councils, and then the prioritization of technical assistance. They're all rated high. That's the focus of today's meeting is why we want your help in prioritizing, because money only goes so far. Okay, getting to those specific technical assistance or guidance materials. We asked you to indicate the importance of 5 different ones. The 2 highest were growth and rural area and place type descriptions. The pie chart you see here, that was at 66%. And then the next, or actually the highest, was model climate vulnerability assessments and climate action plans. The last 3, let me get to my notes. Inland flooding was 65%, infill development tools and incentives 66%, community engagement 62%. So like I said, everything's high. We want it all. And we're going to be asking for your assistance in prioritizing that. Okay. So in the comments here, people indicated that the essential importance of community engagement in order to get buy-in locally. In addition to what we heard earlier about just the benefits, describing the benefits of planning in general, there was recommendations for describing the benefits of directing growth on infrastructure. costs. That is, if you do it this way, you will save money in the long run. The benefits of farmland protection, also, and these are fiscal benefits, and also the strengthened community benefits. Updating the comp plan manual, people had some specifics there saying we want simplified guidance chapter by chapter. And hearkening back up to the first bullet, analyses of the fiscal impacts of different development types. I've seen that done in Austin, Texas. It's very powerful. And so if we could get that kind of work done in Maine, I think that would be really, really helpful. Additionally, access to GIS and model ordinances. And then there were some specifics for tools development, farmland inventory methods, infrastructure capacity analyses. That's kind of related to the fiscal impacts of development, affordable housing models, and regional coordination strategies. So this is in many ways training the trainers to help towns with these issues. So our conclusions, and we've said this before, guidance, training, and community engagement, updating manuals with very tangible tools for implementation, and facilitating GIS capacity and access to it. And when I say they're all user capacities, what I mean is providing GIS that isn't, here's a shape file, what do I do with this? It's the kind of interfaces that Ashley has worked on, and then guidance on how to use it if you have no GIS capacity or experience at all. So there's a whole range there of GIS support. Jumping to the needs and importance of various options to implement the future land use plan. So that culminating strategy in a comprehensive plan is your future land use plan. What are things that could help you implement that? The highest vote getter here, model zoning and land use ordinances at 66%. Model cluster subdivision ordinance was only 39%. Site plan review, a little higher at 58%. Land use law, education, and model capital investment plans, roughly 53, 52%. So they're all positive, but the two highest were the model zoning and land use, and then coordination among state agencies. Look at that, 76% is critical in order to implement the future land use plan. I think that is a really important number. So comments on this. Guidance and practical or customizable application is critical. The financial implications of growth planning, we heard that before, it's stated again. Diverse models. Some people had trouble with the word model, so maybe a more accessible term. We use it as, here's how to do it this way, and you can adapt it to your needs. That's what we mean by model. Specific tools are needed. These were in the comments previously, and they're again. Systems to monitor how well you're doing. Farmland protection strategies. Zoning, again, came out, and this was related to farmland and critical habitat, that it's critical, and that people want models for how to improve infrastructure. Frameworks for collaboration was mentioned in this area. Intermunicipal agreements for shared growth, and how to just work out regional issues. So our conclusions: make guidance and models customizable, communicate the benefits of all of it, planning, financial implications, where infrastructure goes, using in terms of dollar impacts. Dollars speak volumes, and then providing models for collaboration. Okay, last two questions in this area asked whether the state should establish a dedicated funding source for local and regional planning and for plan implementation. Boom, 86% absolutely agree, and that's not surprising. Then the other question was, what about establishing a planning advisory committee to advise the Municipal Planning Assistance Program on the development of rules, technical assistance, and growth management program review? strong, 67%. But there were a variety of comments on this. The agreement on local and regional funding for local and regional planning is not surprising. One historical observation was, while this law was enacted in 1988, it has lacked dedicated funding since 1988, and that has really hindered its effectiveness. And we're in the same boat now. Individuals indicated that funding is crucial. They cannot afford the cost of consultants, or the select board simply say, we're not giving you that much. We'll give you this much, make it do. The people also say that we need to prioritize state and regional resources for maps and data. That is provision of it by the state so that towns can focus on future planning. And that's really sort of this question of efficiency in order to stretch dollars. The support for the advisory committee was clear, though there was some expressions of skepticism and distrust, basically of state government, to do it at all. Those who support it stressed the need to include local and regional planners and to integrate diverse perspectives. And then the final comments were, this is great, financial support, advisory council, but really update the law, the rules, and guidance. So our conclusions are that we will continue, been doing it for years, to request and secure dedicated funding for local and regional planning and implementation, to prioritize this efficient delivery of data to allow towns to really focus on their strategies on the future, that any advisory committee be broadly inclusive of advice and input, and that we should focus on updating the rules. So I'm now going to pass the baton to Jody Sapphire. She is Special Assistant to the Commissioner at DACF, excellent facilitator, and she's going to walk us through. I'm going to, as I did before, the conclusion slides, boom, 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 are right after this. She's going to walk us through and ask these, are there any general reactions or surprises, and did we miss anything questions? And then we will also move to prioritization. So over to you, Jody.
Great, thank you, Judy. Hi, everyone. I see we have 31 people on the line, and definitely want to get as much input as possible. So if you have a comment that you'd like to make as we go through the slides, just raise your hand and I'll take you in the order in which I see you. So if you want to move to the next slide, Judy, for question 2, and this is a summary of both the comments received and then the conclusions that the program has drawn. And I also want to add in here, if you have any clarifying questions about the comments that were made, some of these were made by, 1 or 2 individuals, some were broader themes, but I'll open this one up for comment. The degree to which various actions are effective in directing growth away from critical habitats. Reactions to this, any surprises to you?
I'll make one comment while people are ginning up the courage to say something or to be the first one. Michael, I'm looking at you. You've always been great for that. But one thing I'll comment on as we go through these slides, just to sort of keep in your mind. In the conclusions, the text in purple are the ones that we see to be really focused on technical assistance. And as we come to the end and discuss priorities, we've pulled those together in, we hope, a more cohesive way. But that's why that color is purple. So over to all of you for general reactions.
Did you feel like any actions that are critical were missing from the survey? We only included 5 in the survey: land conservation, conservation education and outreach, mapping of climate hazards, comments from state agencies during consistency reviews, and then current use taxation. Jim, go right ahead.
Sure, I'm not afraid. The you know, a lot of our towns and rural men don't have zoning, and so model zoning ordinances as they pertain to shoreland zoning or the state mandated zoning are, you know, certainly a good idea. I think those exist by and large. I think probably in the towns that don't have zoning, our strongest suit has been septic systems and just making it harder to put them in and remediate land for them. And probably the challenge I'm facing mostly now is with climate change, people are building right up to the floodplain line. And I'm saying that's moving, but they still, you know, it may be something with shoreland zoning in that after the first 75 feet, if there were some stronger statement about elevation that would fit within shoreline zoning, would be helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Remind us, the community that you're working with
Well,
or
I'm
your
the
role.
town manager of Deer Isle. I'm also on the board of directors for the Hancock County Planning Commission, and I've worked with over all 37 towns in Hancock County at some point.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. Other reactions, things that might be missing here from this list. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
I'd like to, I guess, second um, how I understood what one of the things Jim was saying, which is some, I don't know, stronger or effective tools that don't necessarily go through zoning, um, that either discourage or, you know, discourage overdevelopment or encourage conservation, however you want to frame that, because that could also work in conjunction with zoning. I feel like that would be a good tool, or good tools. And another thought, no, just left. If I remember, I'll chime back in.
Yeah, no problem. Others' reactions. Were there any surprises to you in terms of the ranking of these? Basically, comments from state agencies during consistency reviews and also current use taxation ranked quite low, and there was some negative feedback about CU programs in general. That frankly surprised me. I've been working on those programs in a completely different venue, and I hadn't heard that criticism quite so strongly. So any other surprises to you in terms of the ranking of it? Okay. All right. Well, then we'll bring you back to the TA
Jody?
piece. Yeah.
Jody, Michael has his hand up.
Oh, sorry.
I never put it down. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Well, so then let's move on to question 10. And this is about prioritizing financial support for various actions to encourage growth and development in locally designated growth areas. Again, you'll recall what Judy described was that what received the highest priority was municipal grants for implementation ordinances. Second to that was funding to regional councils to provide municipal TA. And third was direct municipal grants for comp plan development. And then fourth, the funding for state agencies and or regional councils to improve assembly and delivery of GIS maps and data. Funding to MPAP, very low percentage, but again, to Judy's point, a lot of requests for support for direct TA development, resource development. Clarifying questions about any of the comments that people made. I'll give you a moment to read through those again. And surprises at all to you? Or just reactions in general? Yes, Erica, go ahead. And if you could let us know where you're from or what your affiliation is.
Yes, Erica Buffkins, land use planner at AvCog. I've been thinking about this a lot recently as well, just in the sense of, from the regional planning standpoint, the manuals. And thinking about it, Judy, you even just said that, people want more resources, but they also don't want to give the state funding for things like that. I do think it would be a good opportunity to loop in the regional councils for stuff like that. I know for myself, and even in talking to a lot of the other regional planners within the last few days about this, we all have different guidance materials that we use, and we start to get down the path with it, that I think it would be a really great way to spend some of our time and funding to create some of those documents for you. And I know some of the ones I've referred to in the past have, the regional councils involved. But as a side to that, I do think it would be important for us as regional councils to kind of seek out from the towns what exactly they want to see in the manual as well. I know for myself, there are certain things, I focus on, and my understanding of the topics could be a little more developed than somebody who's just walking into the comprehensive plan committee for the first time. So I just really think it would be, building off of what we've done here with all of the feedback and just getting our minds together. I do think it would be nice, maybe in follow up, for regional planners to kind of go out and talk to some of the towns about this, prod at them a little bit more to say, okay, what do you want to see in these sort of manuals when they come out? Is there anything that you would find particularly useful? And I know I try to do that in, just when I go to meetings and such, but I do think it would be a good way to kind of spread that work so that MPAP's not encumbered with updating 15 training documents, and at least then we can fill in some of those places.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that you saw, and those who participated in the last two meetings saw community engagement come up a lot. And I think in a lot of ways that was targeting how does a town itself engage its community members, but you're raising another kind of layer of communications that also is critical. So I appreciate you doing that. Miriam, go ahead. And then Avery.
Yeah, my role at DACF is farmland protection, so I'm coming at all of this comp planning from that perspective. But what I've done so far is work with some municipalities that have invited me to come discuss how town policy or comp plans can be supportive of farmland protection. And I'm kind of curious from planners and folks who are coming directly from municipalities and regional planners, I guess, where some of the more like technical side things might be helpful. So farmland protection, where is it helpful to have somebody whose expertise is in farmland conservation? Where is it helpful to have somebody whose expertise is in conservation versus just town planning step in and provide more TA?
So I'll hold on Avery for just one moment to see if any of the planners on the call want to respond to Miriam's question about that. Have you encountered that issue and have any feedback to provide to her? And then I'll grab you, Avery.
I'll go again if no one else wants to say anything.
Go ahead, Erica.
I know for me, when people reach out and want to do more from the preservation aspect, I do lead them towards different materials. But even just having this conversation, I would love to be able to bridge that gap as a regional planner. If I do see a certain community is really interested in these things, I'd be happy to say, okay, you should reach out here and schedule a meeting of some sort, just because, like you said, you're going to know more about the subject that is your profession than, I would. So I do think it would be worthwhile to then kind of, just have that communication, because I would be happy to put anybody in contact with the resources they need. But that's just, the way I go about it.
Yeah, yeah. And so maybe it points to, and perhaps this information exists already, resource materials that could be provided to local planners specifically on the topic of farmland conservation. Let me take Avery and then Michael. And if Avery, if you could let us know who you're affiliated with.
Yeah, hi, my name is Avery. I'm with the Hancock County Planning Commission. I missed part of what Erica said. I had to take a call, so I may be repeating this, but I think another one of the roles that we can play is collecting those community engagement examples and putting those into, whether it's updating the manual, but just having a collection that, we're doing this work every day. I do it for the communities that we're already working with, where we come in and we say, this is how X community did it, this is how X community did it. So having a central place where we can give that information to. So.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Michael, go ahead. And Michael, do folks know where you're from? I think you might have said it yesterday, but.
Yeah, I'm the town planner for Damascotta and Newcastle. I think one of the things that I'm struggling with, and I'm imagining that a lot of, I'll say my constituents are struggling, I get the sense that would help them is like an awareness of what tools may be out there before they need them. I think that there's waiting for the community to say, oh, here's the issue, how do we solve it? I think that there's unfortunately a lack of awareness of all of the issues that a lot of the towns face. Not that, I mean, the local residents certainly know some of the issues and some of the challenges and things that they see, but there are, I think, like waiting for them to come and ask for something, it makes it, there may be a really good tool out there that we're like, oh my God, that's exactly what the problem is. So I don't know if that's like public outreach, as well as better kind of coordination with, and I know not a lot of towns don't have planners, but like with whether it's town managers or just residents, getting people to understand what the things that people are talking about, so that they can then kind of go back to their regional or state representatives or assistants and ask for, yeah, we are interested in whatever that program or tool
Sure.
or assistance is.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes sense. Thank you. Matthew, go right ahead. Just let us know where you're from.
Sure. Matt Nazar, I'm the Director of Development Services in the City of Augusta. I think that what I would suggest is, with respect to updating TA resources and models, I just want to be more specific. I think that at least the planners on the line have a pretty clear understanding of what outcomes might be as you're making recommendations to a community and trying to lead them through a process and help them understand what it is they're trying to get to. But the average person who's going to be voting on these things, even if I'm talking to a city councilor who does this on a regular basis here in Augusta, understanding what an outcome looks like they don't have that sort of understanding. So 2-acre zoning sounds rural to people. No, that's not rural at all. I think that would provide some real level of assistance to people to have a better understanding of what these things look like. We talk a lot about regulations. We talk a lot about supporting development in certain parts of a community, but having an understanding of what the outcomes are and what the how you get to those outcomes, I think is critical. Exactly how we achieve that, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
But I think that that's what needs to be the focus, rather than, you need this paragraph in your zoning ordinance, or you need that paragraph in your zoning ordinance.
Mm-hmm,
Why?
mm-hmm.
Why?
Yeah. No, thank you. Great point. I'm thinking that you have partly addressed already the question of what's missing here. Some of the comments made were focused on that, but I'll just ask that one more time before we move on to the next question. Did either the survey questions, like the options that were made available to rank, or the conclusions that the program has drawn, do you feel like there's something missing there? Michael, go ahead.
I think this hopefully will fit here. One of the notes that I had made was tools that are available to municipalities to encourage growth, like tax abatements or whatever it is, that are a little bit lighter than like a TIF district. I know in some places you could get like a 5-year abatement. If you do improvements, basically we're not going to tax it for the next 5 years. And just things like that might be a little bit easier to a lighter lift than going all out with a TIF or something like that. Otherwise, I tend to see a lot of planning as kind of a break without much gas, and maybe there are tools that I'm not aware of, but I feel like that would be a nice complement.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, unless there's a burning final comment, I think I might shift us to question 11. Again, recall we will be coming back to these items in purple or blue, however they're showing up on your screen, that are specifically TA, and you're going to be going through a ranking exercise toward the end. But on this question, this again, asked folks to indicate the relative importance of various technical assistance or guidance materials for planning. And you'll recall that 5 topics or materials were offered, and the highest ranking one was model climate vulnerability assessments and climate action plans. Secondarily, I believe it was growth and rural areas / place types, descriptions, standards, requirements to create future land use plans and maps. The other items that received less support, but just less support than those 2, but all were seen as definitely important, were better identification of inland hazards, such as flooding, fire, wind, etc., infill development planning tools and incentives, and community engagement strategies. We keep coming back to that topic. So as you take a look at these comments and conclusions, wondering if you have, first and foremost, any clarifying questions about the comments or the conclusions, and just general reactions to where the program landed on these points. Seemed right to you? Okay. All right. Well, then let's move on to the next question. Question 12 was about kind of the relative importance of various things, various ordinances predominantly, but not exclusively, to implement the future land use plan portion of the comprehensive plan. And again, the item that received the highest ranking was coordination among state agencies to fund implementation. Everything on this list, aside from model cluster subdivision ordinance development, received over 50% support. the second most important one was model zoning and land use ordinances. So just reactions to either the comments or the conclusions on this one. Michael, go ahead.
I think I've mentioned this before, but I think the implementation of the actual ordinance, and I don't know, maybe right now we're kind of talking more about getting the comp plan ideas into the ordinance, but I've noticed kind of the purpose of some of the regulations, even if they're put in there, the actual implementation, when someone comes in and submits an application and we're like, no, you can't do that. I feel like there's, at least I've seen a little bit of, well, this standard doesn't make sense, so we're not going to, really lean into enforcement of it. And I appreciate it's a very local, and it's going to vary by municipality and personnel, but I think that's an important thing to consider when you are working on your comp plan, is that, and translating that into an ordinance is like, it's easy to, for me anyway, to stay up in the clouds of like, here's the purpose, and yeah, we understand what that means, but to like say, like, is this a really easy, digestible, like, we understand what the rule is and why it's there, so that it's very kind of hard to argue with for a resident who comes in and is talking to a code enforcement or a planning board or whoever. So that's that area, I think, for me, is something that is needs more attention, and could kind of provide, I think, significant dividends in actually getting the comp plan concepts to actually land on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. I am wondering whether, this issue of frameworks for collaboration was not I just want to make sure I'm saying this correctly, was not an issue that was actually raised in the survey itself. Like it was not an option raised, but it was brought up in the comments. And I'm curious, amongst the planners on the call, if you're seeing this as a high need yourselves. Intermunicipal agreements for shared growth, regional issues. Are you seeing that there are multiple towns that are in need of greater assistance in that area, or just feedback on that in particular, since it wasn't really offered up, if you will, as in the original question of the survey?
I'm not sure if this is exactly answering the question along those lines, but just in terms of regional collaborations for planning, I know this is something that I've brought up to Judy, Joan, everybody in their office, that I would like the opportunity to do plans from a regional standpoint in the towns that would like to do that. And there's a big emphasis on that. I know there are a few towns that I'm working with right now that are working on the comp plan at the same time. And given that all three towns are strapped for time and resources, it would be nice if there could be some connection between them without having to have the whole list of requirements that come with that. So I do think it'd be nice if in the places where it makes sense to do those things, if, there was a little bit more direction and a slight push for that. But again, I would like to recognize that every municipality has their own decisions and choices. So it's really just where it's applicable. I would love to be able to do that. It's kind of complicated to put all those pieces together.
Yeah. Thank you. No, that does answer that directly. Michael, go ahead.
This was a thought that I had before, but I think it speaks to what Erica was just saying. I'm wondering if there's the possibility or a place for like a regional plan that can be developed by county or the council of governments or whatever, that for a lot of communities that don't have zoning or do have zoning and want to, they could almost like adopt that and write zoning that is supported by that, or even sections of it. So we can say, oh, well, our natural resources section, like, we like what the county came up with, and we want to just go with that. That might kind of allow them to be like, well, we'll just take the default. And if they want to do a deeper dive into something, that they could then have, develop their own natural resources or housing like element or chapter, however you want to call that. I don't know if that's legally, the viability of it, but in concept, it seemed like it could be helpful.
Yeah.
For municipalities.
Thank you. Matthew. You're muted.
Sorry about that. I forgot to turn my mic on. I think that could be useful in some parts of the state. The challenge I think that you're going to face, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, is if there is a significant difference between municipal size and form of government. It's obviously, the city of Augusta it's challenging when you're talking to a neighbor that has a select board form of government and a population that is, a tenth the size of our city or something along that line. They don't want to cooperate because they're afraid of essentially getting pushed around. At the same time, I was a select board member in my hometown in Vreedfield, and it was pretty easy to cooperate with our surrounding communities where we already had some level of cooperation on schools and some cooperation on landfills and transfer stations. And they were communities of all relatively equal size. So I think the problem that presents is where you want to think about how growth is going to occur if you don't have the big communities, the service center communities in the conversation. You're sort of leaving an enormous part of the discussion about how growth occurs in a region out. So that's a real challenge.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. I don't want to limit your thinking to this intermunicipal issue, but I did want to make sure it got some airtime since it wasn't part of the framing initially of the survey itself. Anything else that you would have drawn different conclusions than what the program has drawn here? Michael.
I just want to say, this isn't to I disagree or that there's something missing, but I think that the benefits in terms of dollar impact, I think, is really, really important. I think the cost of sprawl, to kind of use a buzzwordy term there, is something that I don't think a lot of residents or people in the field pay enough attention to, in my opinion. And I would like to really support that, saying, like, if you're building infrastructure, it's going to cost you money at some point.
Sure. So
what's the return?
Yeah, thanks. Matthew?
I'm going to second that. And the reason I'm going to second it is over the 30 some odd years of my career, I started out in the early 1990s and we started out in a recession, and planning was very much couched in terms of economics. And then it was couched in terms of sprawl because development occurred. And then now it's being couched, of course, in terms of climate issues because those are important. But the reality is, I think that it almost always comes back to economics. So I think that focusing, and it's the easiest issue, it's the easiest way to address planning issues to the broadest set of individuals and interests. So I would suggest that that's a great way to focus any sort of technical assistance guidance, any sort of communication, is in terms of the economic benefits.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Matthew. Representative Gear.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I really appreciate this part of the conversation, and I just would want to just ask an additional question because both on the sort of the cost of sprawl that was just touched on, that sort of you can illustrate by looking at one municipality, because there is obviously a correlation between more roads, needing more maintenance, needing more snow removal, whatever it is. But I also would want to just put on the table the possibility to illustrate the cost of shared problems like homelessness and people being unhoused, or like again, maybe it could be a climate impact that is shared across municipalities, where again, I think it's even harder to see those impacts because the impacts are separated out at the municipal level without the collective group of those logical communities that are connected to each other seeing the impact. And I guess I just wanted to put that question on the table to see if there's any reaction to it.
So could you frame that as a question? Because I'm understanding the essence of your point, that there are impacts that impact, that there are issues that impact multiple communities that are not not one community owns the problem. It's multiple communities own the problem. But can you frame that in terms of a question if you're looking for feedback on that?
Thank you for requiring me to clarify what I'm thinking of. So if we take, for example, the problem of people being unhoused in a multi-municipal area, the way that we currently handle those sorts of issues is through something that's very municipally oriented, through general assistance. It's a specific cost that you're bearing, but only if that person happens to apply for GA in your town. Mm-hmm. When we all know that, again, homelessness is an issue that's shared regionally, and people are becoming unhoused for a variety of reasons across a region. And so in that case, the cost is not being illustrated in the collective there. So the question I would ask is, would it be helpful for the development of a comprehensive plan to have that view of a problem at the service center sort of level, to say, if we want to address this problem, we need to look at the impacts, not just in one town, but across the region. Would that be helpful?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you. Any particular feedback that folks would like to give Representative Gear on that point? Michael, go ahead.
I think that would be helpful. I think a lot of the issues that I think planning, at least conceptually, is done fairly well at that multi municipality or kind of regional level. I think service centers as a concept makes a lot of sense, because nobody stays in there. Very few people anyway stay in their municipality, I feel like, for the whole day, at least in Lincoln County, I would guess. So I think that's a really useful perspective. And I would say, I think yesterday I was saying, we need to address these problems at a local level, at a municipal level, planning. And I think a lot of the implementation probably does happen there, but I do think that discussing and framing the issues at a more regional level and having some resources at the regional level is 100% necessary. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you. Stephen, go ahead. If you could just let us know your affiliation. And you're on mute.
Certainly. I think I'm off mute now.
There you go.
Thank you very much for all of the work you all are doing. It's very helpful to work through this process, and I appreciate Judy's time and Erica's time and Representative Jagir's question. For us in Wyndham, I'm the director of the Wyndham Planning Department, and our issue is that we're sort of at the crossroads of multiple communities that are going through different kinds of growth issues, and there's a lot of pressure on us now to up our game into a more sophisticated role model for the other communities further north on 302, west on 115/35 and east on 115 towards Gray, and all the connectivity that goes through the main turnpike. Now we're trying to coordinate through PACS, transportation planning, cooperative analysis of these corridors. But one of the questions that we have to answer, which we don't have information, is on what is happening in other communities. What is their pressures in other communities? Are we pushing our pressures onto them because it's easier to develop? It's not as rigorous, or there's just more green opportunities there than there are here. So models for collaboration, I think, is really a critical thing for us here in Wyndham, that we need to reach out to our abutting communities. In some cases we do have good communication, and we work with them on planning projects such as Westbrook and Gorham. And we just implemented a master plan to coordinate our planning in South Wyndham with Little Falls of Gorham to make things consistent and not push planning, not push development in one community or the other, but try to harmonize this sort of by municipality community. So we have those areas across town and associated with Gray and whatnot. We just need a better handle on how we can integrate that into our comprehensive plan so that we're understanding, with our development areas, our future growth plans, are we creating more problems for them? And can we work in harmony to sort of mitigate those pressures across the greater region?
Excellent. Great to hear. That's great to hear. I'm inclined to move us to the next two questions, unless Representative Gear, I'm thinking that your hand is up from the previous point, but if I'm mistaken about that, you can let me know. Michael, go ahead.
I just had one quick thought on this point, which is, I think that regional coordination and addressing issues at a regional level is great, but I think, and probably maybe this goes without saying, it's like it needs to come with some kind of funding. Like if Damerscotta, for instance, Service Center, and not that I want to be like, oh, we're happy to take on everybody else's problems, but I think that as a service center, we probably have a responsibility and a benefit to address regional issues, but it can't. I think too many residents here see it as like just a cost, that everybody else is exporting their issues to us, and resources obviously become an issue.
Yeah. No, thank you. Okay, I think I'm going to pivot us then to the next, what sort of dealt with two questions at once. We'll pull up 18 first, or maybe 18 and 19 are one side. Yeah. So the first question, as a reminder, should the state establish a dedicated funding source for local and regional planning and plan implementation? That received an 86% level of support. And the second one is, should the state establish a planning advisory committee to advise the Municipal Planning Assistance Program on the development of rules, TA needs, and growth management program review? Again, strong support of that, 67%. So if you could just take a moment to look at those comments and conclusions and see if you have any clarifying questions or general reactions to what's on here. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
I think one of the things that I hope is relevant for this is maybe some guidance in the what I'm going to call like the machinery of the apparatus, which is of the municipal process, which again I know is like a fairly local, and I'm sure some municipalities do this super well and some don't. but the process, I think, for the two towns I work in, is something that I think could be really streamlined and should be secondary to the zoning and the policies. And I think that would be very helpful. And I think it probably goes beyond planning, but some assistance in just the general processing and streamlining of, you know, the planning administration. I want it to get so small that, like, you don't even really think about it. It's a non-issue, rather, so that we can focus on where we want, you know, the bigger issues, basically the software of the machine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Can you just give us a like one example of what you're talking about? Like, you know, forms are too cumbersome, filing something is too complicated. Can you just?
I would say both of those. I do think the forms are a problem. Making sure your forms actually align with, you're asking the questions that need to be answered in order to determine whether or not the zoning is met. So your ordinance and your forms meet.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Let's see. So about a dedicated funding source and an advisory committee or an advisory council. Grania, go right ahead.
Hi, just this kind of goes off of what Michael was just saying, but it's something that we haven't talked a whole lot about, is kind of the education piece at the local level for our volunteer committees, such as planning boards, board of appeals, some of the trainings that they really should have, that maybe, you know, somebody's been on the planning board for 25 years, took when they first started, but that was 25 years ago. Like Freedom of Access Act, the Maine Municipal Association offers a lot of these trainings, but they're 4 hours long. And from what we've run into at KV Cog is that a lot of the towns won't pay their planning board members to go to these trainings. So making sure that they have the baseline education to be going over site plan reviews, ordinance reviews, and all that would be very helpful.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So Joan, I'm sure you're getting that down, but I'm seeing that as sort of another technical assistance need that's being suggested. And I'm happy to be picking those up too. I don't want to lose sight of the specifics of these two questions, but if you're thinking of other things that are missing, that's fine too. Matthew, you go ahead.
Yeah, the last thing, I'll second that. I have planning board members that go to the training that is offered right now through MMA. And while it's useful, it's brutal because it's a 4-hour death march. So if there's a way to improve that process through regional trainings or through the state's technical assistance program, I think that'd be extremely useful.
Great. Good. Okay. Very helpful. Other reactions, things that are missing on these conclusions. All right. Okay. So what we're going to do is, go ahead, Michael, and then we'll
So I just wanted to ask that when we're talking about an advisory committee, what exactly? I'm wondering how that would work exactly. Is this like I assume it's not like a regional body that's going to overrule a local one. So I'm just wondering what's being thought of there.
Yeah, and just so, and I'll Judy, you can answer this, but just to remind folks what the wording of the question was in the survey, the state should establish a planning advisory committee. This is a question, should they, to advise the municipal planning assistance program on the development of rules, technical assistance needs, and growth management program review. Judy, anything else you want to add?
Just that there have been a variety of advisory committees over the years. and that there is not one now. So I think, Jody just described what it would be, who it would be advising. It's certainly not the same thing as one of the recommendations that came out yesterday, I think, of, a regional planning board overruling local. That's not what we're talking about here. Think back to the Community Preservation Advisory Committee, which was in the early 2000s. There was an advisory committee way back when the law first was created in the early 90s. So that's what we're thinking of.
Yeah, Michael, go ahead. Thank you, Judy.
Yeah, thank you. That's I figured it wasn't that. My 2 cents is, it sounds like it's kind of oversight, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm wondering how input from the it seems like it might be a little cumbersome. If I was in your shoes, I feel like the actual the state employees and the staff, if they're getting direction from communities, that's probably where it needs to come from. Doesn't need to go through an advisory council. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you.
My 2 cents. So.
Sure. All right. Well, what I'm inclined to do is to pivot us to the next thing, unless there's a final comment about these 2 issues, dedicated funding or advisory council concept. Going once. And so I'm going to turn this back over to Judy, because what we're going to do is just give a very brief summary of kind of what came out of meetings 1 and 2, so that you can be reminded of that before we pivot to a TA prioritization exercise. So give it back to you, Judy.
Thanks, Jody. So again, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of people's participation here. So these are summaries here of 1 and 2 that we heard. 1, recall, was what was missing, the same kind of format we had today, but the focus was on the state review process and helping towns prepare comp plans. So some of the general reactions were, I don't need to read this verbatim, but survey of, or rather catalog of examples. There was some frustration expressed by medium and larger communities that they couldn't simply just say NA, that is not applicable for some of the requirements in the rule, or as the rule is laid out in the checklist. They want guidance on whether the most critical issues were addressed successfully. And I thought that was a really insightful comment that came from the GPCOG planner. Another observation was that code enforcement is critical for implementation, but it's often, they're not the same people in the room. And it's essentially divorced from the planning process. And that CEOs just wear way too many hats. A state agency rep identified that there was formerly training with MMA and the state on CEOs, and that should really be looked at again. And then state reps, I should say state agency representatives, that wasn't a legislator, that was someone who works at a state agency. They're asking, okay, can we provide better guidance at the beginning? And one of the things that came out of the first focus group was a conversation around the idea of a symposium among the state agencies who both provide data and who review comp plans, so that they can get a better sense of what is it that helps, that would be helpful. And I don't see that as only a symposium with state agencies, but also to invite municipalities there for that kind of some interactions. So that was seen as something that could help. And it was, I thought of it originally because there's a lot of new people in state agencies, and they just get thrown into you're the one that does comp plans, and some of them are like, what's a comp plan? So there really does need to be some basic understanding of what it is and what is helpful. And the people within state agencies are truly interested in learning about this. In terms of what was missing, these were observations that code officers have different perspectives than planners, and they weren't in the room. I said that already. Jim, this was yours, Jim Fisher, that we need technology information for smaller, alternative, and affordable septic systems, because a lot of towns just don't have and won't ever have central sewer systems. Better guidance was requested on how to pull local data from municipalities when you're working with a local committee. And some of the regional councils, again, like state agency representatives, they're new. They'd like some additional trainings and assistance. And one of those in particular was dealing with American Community Survey data, especially everywhere, but especially in rural areas, because the margins of error are enough to make you drive you to drink. Okay, focus group 2, general reactions. This is the focus group that looked on how to support implementation of comprehensive plans, going to that step of implementation. So general reactions were that many issues that must be addressed. Oh, I've typed that incorrectly. Sorry. I think this was your point, Michael, that there's a lot of issues that really have to happen at the local level. Regional councils can help small towns, but we need help within towns. And I'm in that sense, I'm thinking of sort of the mid-sized, larger towns is where you were coming from there. And that technical assistance supports you guys. The whole Maine Uniform Building Code and code enforcement is really a thorny little issue. We need, again, this was your idea, Michael, some models for the administrative procedures to deal with that. And Erica commented, again, this is around code enforcement, but we basically need to start the education of what civil service is sooner in high school. And that's being on a select board, being on a planning board, being a code officer. It really runs the gamut. And that would be, that'd be an interesting graduate student project, wouldn't it? Anyway, CEOs wear too many hats. We said that. They need more support. Flexible, fine, but they must be clearer. Shoreland zoning was brought up a couple of times as being difficult to interpret. I will let you know, I've tried not to talk. I've been listening mode for the last through these focus groups, but DEP is working on a big upgrade to their outreach materials on shoreland zoning. And we are putting money from the NOAA grant into statewide shoreland zoning mapping, which I think should help with this considerably. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is in the works. The missing things that were identified yesterday were that local opposition is a huge barrier and our conclusions don't address it. And I'll say guilty as charged because that's a really tough one. Also, in the need for good rural examples. There's lots of good urban examples, but we need more rural models. This was a nice one. I loved this one from Long Island. It was a citizen planner, did their own plan, got it reviewed and accepted by the state. And she said, we're doing this. We'd like to share what we know. We'd like to hear from other towns of how they did it. So the fact that what she suggested is that the state or regions could facilitate that kind of peer-to-peer learning and sharing. I was delighted to hear that one. And then there's this issue that some towns don't want growth, even if they're growing. Also a tough nut to crack. I mean, the towns that don't want growth if they're growing is difficult. There are towns who don't want growth because they're not growing. And that's the purpose of the growth area exemption in the statute. But that's a different issue than we don't want growth, even though it's coming at us. So that was seen as missing. I'm going to jump to the next slide and tell you what we've done, and then I'll toss the baton back to Jody. What we did here is Joan and Jody and I, we went up to these conclusions and we grabbed the ones in purple that we saw as technical assistance from today. Okay. And then we went back to meeting 1 and meeting 2, and we tried to organize the priorities for technical assistance in these 3 large categories with, interesting, each one has 5 subheadings. This is a lot of work. I think we've covered everything, though I just made note to myself, we have not included what was a very high priority, which was guidance on climate vulnerability assessments and climate action planning, which I think would be somewhere within number 2. So as you now do this exercise, I might pop out and put that in there because we're going to ask you to do some prioritization here. We can't do all of this. What's the most important thing? So Jody's going to lead us through first, are we missing anything? And then the prioritization. So Jody, over to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, Judy laid it out well. I want to give you a moment to read this. It is small print. It takes a little moment to digest. And really the question is, when you think about technical assistance needs, does this list capture kind of the range of needs, knowing that we're going to ask you to pick your top 3, but review that for a couple minutes and just say, like, is something missing here that really should have been on this list?
I'm gonna leave this up in the screen for people to really look at it, and then I'm going to stop. I'm going to go back to being able to edit it because I want to add the climate one, and we'll be able to edit if people have identified things. So I'm going to leave it up for now, and then I'll go into editing mode.
Great. Give you a solid minute, which sounds like nothing, but it's actually a long period of time when there's silence. Okay, Judy, why don't you go into edit mode? We'll add that. And then let's hear whether there are other thoughts that people have that we missed based on today's discussion, or for those who attended either or both of the last 2 discussions, other items that should be in here. Go ahead, Matthew.
I would say that one of the things that needs to be addressed, probably on the professional planner side of things, but also to a certain extent on the citizen planner side of things, is a better understanding of how the development process works from the developer's perspective. And the reason I say that is because as a professional planner, I always think about how this is working from a community level, what the community goals are. All of those things have to be thought of, in my opinion, in the context as well of how development occurs, and enabling the development that you want to occur, and not inadvertently harming the development that you want to occur. That's something that I've been trying to do for myself, at least for the last 5 or 6 years, is have a better understanding of how a developer thinks and what they need in order to achieve the things that the community wants.
Sure.
And make sure that we're not putting impediments in their way to achieve the things we want them to achieve.
Great, great. Thank you so much for raising that. And I think Judy captured that under provide training under F now. Representative Gear, go ahead.
Thanks. And I just wanted to kind of echo, was that Matt that said that, or Matt?
Yep.
Because when I looked at those first 5 under the model zoning ordinances, those are all, for the most part, things that are used to contain or restrict development. And knowing at a very visceral level the housing that we need to produce in a smart way that supports the lives of Maine people, I could be missing something. And that's the question I'm asking. Where is how do we educate people on the models for and benefits of development for human beings to live good lives in Maine in homes that make sense? And I don't see that. And again, if I'm missing something, let me know.
So can I just chime in? Jody, super good point, Representative Gear. I think that's kind of an artifact of pulling the slides from today, because these are mostly the ones that had to do with the conservation ideas. We threw in and support growth in serviced areas. And then I put defining growth in rural down under here for comp plan manual, but I was not super happy with that. It was 11:45 when we did this. So I think you're absolutely right that this one needs probably an F that, go ahead and articulate that one again. Let's get this down. Like,
the shorthand for me would be models for promoting smart growth and development for human homes, homes for humans, human habitat in growth areas.
Good one. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. All right, thank you so much. Michael, we'll go back to you.
I love what was just said, and I wanted to raise the issue of, or opportunity, I think also of the, not just like professional developers that's what they do, they go out looking for opportunities, but also I'm struck, at least in around Damascata and Newcastle, how many, I think the small scale like homeowner who I just know a lot of people who they might not be able to physically build their house from scratch, but you get 2 or 3 of them together and they're like, yeah, I know how to do foundations, I know how to do this. I think that's there's a lot of practical knowledge in the area, and I think that's a real opportunity for kind of it's like the opposite of death by 1,000 paper cuts to address the housing is removing barriers from local people to add another unit or 2 or 3 in addition to getting the medium and large scale developers. And I think a benefit of this also is that's the kind of development that people seem to like and not fear.
Yeah, no, that's great. You'll see, Michael, that Judy just added some nuance to 3F to address your point. And I realize it's, my head, sorry for if anybody's looking at my image right now, I'm 2 inches from the screen just so I can see it. But let's put this back now into presentation mode and give you all a moment now to see it more easily. And then give you one last shot at, yeah, something's missing here before we pivot to a voting exercise or a ranking exercise. Janice, go ahead and remind us where you're from.
Town of Long Island. And I'm not sure if this fits here, but one thing that looks like it's missing is help navigating getting projects done. So on the implementation side of things, if we have a big project working with multiple agencies, as an example, we have certain projects where we have to navigate DEP, Maine DOT, FEMA, all these different agencies that have different rules, different, sometimes they're seem at odds with each other and at odds with what may be in our comp plan. So just, help actually getting projects done and navigating that permit process and all of the, what my town feels like is red tape. When we're trying to do the right thing, but it's really difficult across multiple agencies with slightly different rules. So that's different than training. And some of the case studies, it's really navigating and aligning the requirements from multiple agencies, both at the state and federal level, and having that fit with what we've got approved by our town and the state to do in our comp plan. And sometimes those things seem at odds. So how do we help? Is there help to navigate that and get it all aligned and done?
Perfect. Yep. Okay. We got it. 2G. It's now 2G. All right. And so that was Janice, right? So the hand up is covered. Yes, I'm sorry. I just completely forgot. Yeah, okay, perfect. All right. Well, then I'm gonna say that this is good enough. It's never going to be a complete list because there's an endless number of needs, but I think this is going to be good enough for you all to spend the next 5 minutes choosing your top 3. And I know that you probably feel that way more than 3 of these items are essential, but you can rely on your other colleagues on the call to likely pick some of them up when you can't. So if you could simply, everyone on the line who's interested and willing, put in the chat by number and letter, which would be your top 3 choices, if only 3 of these things could be focused on. And there are 25 of you on the line, but there's 3 of us kind of presenting or note taking. So I'm going to be wrapping this up when I see roughly 22 answers. Not assuming everybody wants to do this exercise, but that's what I'll be looking for. So take your time. And maybe this goes without saying, but no judgment here. Nobody's going to be looking at your your answers and wondering why you didn't pick something else. It's a hard exercise to do. Six. Got 9 of you have responded so far out of about 22. up to 14. We've got 15 of you right now, 16, 17. Out of 23. One, two, three, four, five, six. We're up to 18. I'm thinking that there may be 5 others of you who have not responded. Could you just call out if you'd like more time? Anybody just call out? There may be folks who just don't want to do the exercise, which is fine. Okay. All right. Then I'm going to assume that we're done, but feel free in the last couple of minutes here to add in if you'd like. Yeah, we got another one. So I'm going to turn it back over to Judy just to say a little bit about, what are we doing with this information? Judy, go ahead.
Thank you, Jody. And
Yeah.
again, thanks to everybody who's participated today and in these 3 focus groups. All of the recordings and the PowerPoint presentations for these 3 focus groups are going to be posted. The first one is already posted for the first focus group on the link that's there to the program, the survey results. I think, I just remembered one question we didn't cover because
What would we not do?
the final question where we asked, it must not have been numbered. We asked final thoughts about the main office of community affairs is being created and multiple programs are going to be integrated in. And do you have thoughts about how it should be, what they should think about? And we didn't include that. I need to go and look at those because this is grist for the mill for that new office. It will integrate municipal planning, housing opportunity, resilient Maine, floodplain, and code enforcement, as well as the coastal program, all in one office. And many of the technical assistance needs, and the other thing that it has as its, terms of reference is to help coordinate across state agencies. So, and on these issues that we've been discussing today. So, I guess in terms of where this goes from here, it will certainly be made available to all of the staff who will be moving into that office and the new director, Samantha Horn, because this, especially your voting just now, will give us our best set of priorities for where limited dollars can be spent to assist with technical assistance. So I think what I'll probably do, because I'm really curious, I didn't go look at that final question, is I don't think we have the energy for yet another focus group, but I will assemble what's in that last question, and we may have another thing on the another item on the survey results that says, oh, and by the way, next steps, and we'll put that right at the top, and that final question can be summarized there. I think that's I'm thinking off the top of my head, but that's a gap that we really need to fill. So I guess my last thing that I would ask of everyone else is, any final thoughts about where this is, I'm thinking this can go, or where you'd like to see it go. Okay.
I think this is that it go to a late lunch. No, go ahead, Michael.
Yes.
I was just going to say I'm very happy to hear all the things that Judy, you were saying about the community affairs office, because I feel like that everything you were talking about is needed.
Yeah, it's going to be a game changer. It's not a new SPO. It is it's another animal for a new age, as it were, and it's bringing the right pieces together. Very exciting.
Great. Thank you all. I'm going to ask Judy and Joan and I will stay on the line just to debrief a little bit and talk about next steps. But I just thank you all so very much for participating, not just today, but Michael, you get the prize, but I think there are a couple of others who get a prize as well for having attended all three. So thank you. Whatever your level of commitment was, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks. So long.